right, I've got 11 o'clock. Hey, there's Stephanie. I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. Really good to see you. Um, it's 11. We're going to get started. I know there's still some folks that are probably going to come in if they're like me, always running late. They'll be here, but we'll get started. Just so you know, you're at the Center of Addiction and Faith, and this is the four-part class being led by Otto Schultz about, oh, well, I'll let you know what it's about. You were here last week, and so you're learning lots and lots because Otto is a smart guy. He's been doing this for how many years, Otto? 40?
About 40, yep.
About 40 years. So he's just getting warmed up. And anyway, he's going to be leading us today. I'm just here to remind you of a couple things and say a prayer, and then I'll hand it over to Otto, and he will teach you another session. And there's a handout. Katie, I emailed you a handout. When you get that, could you post it for folks to download? And I suppose we should wait until everybody's here because I know they'll continue to come in. She said will do. So, all right. I'm Ed Treat. I'm the director of the Center of Addiction and Faith, and we have some really amazing opportunities coming up. At the end of this month, we're doing a webinar on the 28th at noon Central Time with Libby Stalis. I think she's in this class. Libby, are you here? I thought I saw Libby come in.
There is a Libby here.
Yeah,
I'm here.
there she is. She's written a book called God Shots, and we're going to be doing a webinar with her. She describes finding God, or she's written a devotional about finding God in all the small, hard places of life, and it sounds fascinating. I haven't looked it over completely, but we're excited to have her coming on the 28th. And then, of course, on the 17th through the 19th, we have our annual conference. And this is our most fully loaded conference in terms of keynote speakers. We've got 6 keynote speakers and 29 breakouts. Because we're doing it all virtually, it allows us to have a lot more resources brought to you. So it's an incredibly good value, and we're excited about that. So if you're not getting information on that, let me know and I'll be sure to send it to you. And then I want to tell you about something new that we've never done before, but we're going to try. I've done it before with the Fellowship of Recovering Lutheran Clergy, a professional group of pastors. We've gone on cruises together because every year we do a retreat, and then we decided let's try doing a retreat on a cruise. We did it, and it was such a wonderful experience. We've repeated it about 4 times. The spouses come. We offer Alanon meetings along with regular 12-step meetings, and it's just an amazing time of fellowship and learning and relaxation, and great time to get away from the winter chill if you're in the northern states, to get a break from the winter. And if you're a clergy, you get to call it work. And so that's a added bonus. So that's going to be February 3rd through the 7th. It's a Monday through a Friday. So again, if you're clergy, you don't have to take a Sunday off if you don't want to. And we're going to be diving into Richard Rohr's book, Breathing Underwater. And so we'll be looking at that, doing presentations, small group discussions. If you don't know the book, I highly recommend it. Breathing Underwater, Spirituality and the 12 Steps. That's all I have. I'm going to say a prayer, and then I'll turn it over to Otto and let him do his thing. The Lord be with you. Gracious and loving God, we come before you today as your children. We know that we are imperfect, and we know that you know that, and you love us no matter what. And for that kind of grace, we're so grateful. Some of us have done and been things that we are not proud of, and yet you've never stopped loving us, and you never gave up, and you continue to work toward healing all your people. There are so many out there still suffering, and we hope to be a resource to them to help save lives however we may. And we know that you are in that business too. And so we give ourselves to you to help guide us into the ways that we can be of service, especially for those who struggle with addiction and their families and loved ones. such a big problem. We need your help. So guide and bless us. Bless Otto today as he speaks, and bless all those who are here, that they hear what they need to hear and are inspired and equipped to do ministry for you. We pray in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Otto, I'm going to let you take over.
Wow. Well, you're a courageous soul, Ed.
I know. It's insanity.
Yeah. Yes, I'm Otto Schultz. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm a semi-retired Lutheran minister, or a failure at retirement if you prefer, and currently the part-time executive director, which I think sounds really pretty far up there, but anyway, I'm the executive director of the Center for the Restoration of Behaviorally Impaired Clergy. That's our folks. And what we want to do today, we're going to break. We will take a break later on, but what I want to do today is talk about a simple model for understanding how to do informal and brief interventions, which is also a model for helping to plan a more formal structured intervention. So that's going to be the first amount of time here, and then we will break, and then we'll go break into smaller groups. We have 4 case studies that you all can wrestle with. And we got some questions that go with each of those case studies. So as a small group, you'll kind of figure out what sort of strategy you want to use for your case, and then we'll come back into the large group and report that. In the meantime, we do have right now a couple minutes for questions, and then we'll get into a presentation called Flashing Your Brights. So any questions, comments from last week? Does anybody remember anything from last week? It looks like Stephanie has a hand up. So
I do. Hi, everybody. I wasn't here last week, so can you give me the Cliff Notes version until I can access the YouTube video that Ed put the link up for in the comments?
you
Thanks.
bet. And it's not necessary that you have the first week in order to get to the second week, because they stand alone. But basically, the thing is, yes, it's both sin and disease, and it's very complicated because it's a spiritual issue, but it's also medical, emotional, and physical. And so, yes, there is brain disease. There's a part of the brain for, especially with alcohol and drug dependence, that is different, and therefore the person's brain and body react differently to alcohol, and they are more prone to dependence. I suspect that at some point, just like with heart disease, we'll see people who, if they'd have done anything at all to be responsible with their diet and their exercise, would never have had any heart disease. And we also see people on the other extreme who they were going to have a heart attack in their early 40s, and they could do all this stuff right, and it was still going to happen to them. And I think when it comes to alcohol and drug dependence, we'll see the same thing. Some people just drank their way into dependency, and other people, if they ever took a drink, they were just going to go down the tube, and that's the way it's going to be. So yeah, that's actually a fair question. I really should be just reviewing what we did last week anyway. So okay, we got another minute for one more question or comment. And if you're raising your hand, I can't see everybody's thing, so you just need to speak up. Oh, we got stuff in the chat. Maybe we should look in the chat, see what's there. That's all stuff from Ed. Okay, we're going to share screen. And, well, yeah, be patient with me. I've only used technology for the last 40 years. So shut that off. Let's start over. Okay, can you see? If you can see, it says flashing your brights or flash on that screen. I know flashing your brights is a dated analogy, but oh well. This is to answer the question, what do you say to a high-risk drinker? I think one of the things we talked about last week is you don't have to worry about diagnosing people. If what you see is some kind of pattern of problems with a person using alcohol or another drug or some other kind of issue, that's really what you need to know as a pastor or as a friend for that matter. So this is, what do you say to a high-risk drinker? So we're not defining anybody as substance dependent or expecting you with your credentials to be able to do that. When we make referrals as clergy, we make referrals to people who can make those decisions. I don't send somebody to a physician because I know they have cancer. I might send somebody to a physician because they're chronically ill and I don't know what's wrong with them. Okay, so what do you say to somebody who's in trouble? Well, maybe you've been in the following argument inside your own head. Maybe you've been in this argument with somebody else. The two of you are talking about a third person, and one of you is saying, look, you can't make another person change. You really can't do anything until they're ready to ask for help. And the other person is saying, or the other side of the argument is, yeah, but if you care about them, whether it's professionally or personally, if you care about them, you can't just do nothing. So what can you do? Now, everybody knows the answer to the following question, which is, what happens to alcoholics before they change? I'm not, since we're on a Zoom, I'm not expecting a total class response here, but everybody knows the answer to that. They must hit bottom, right? Even in this case, rock bottom. That's not true. And if you don't get anything else out of this next 40 minutes or so, please get that. That's not true. We don't have to wait around for people to hit bottom because most people hit bottom when they die. We don't really want to wait that long. Now, that's not true for everybody. A lot of people hit bottom along the way. In my case, I was out drinking with an attorney friend. One Saturday night, we were drinking Chivas Regal. If you know anything about Scotch, you would know that means it was his. And I have no memory of getting home that night. It was in a memory blackout. And I woke up the next morning at 11:15, and that meant I'd slept through church. Well, for most people, sleeping through church isn't that big a deal. But as you folks understand, if you're a pastor at the church, it's more serious. I don't know how the others are, but Lutherans are darn narrow-minded about this kind of thing. They expect the reverend to be there. So that was hitting bottom for me. And it is kind of fun when I'm on a panel at an AA group and the guy in front of me says, yeah, I was dumpster diving and I fell in the dumpster and I passed out. And then I kind of woke up and I kind of thought that was the bottom for me. And then I have to get up and say, well, I missed church. So it's really more serious than that. So what are we talking about when we say flashing your brights? Well, flash is just a simple analogy. When I'm driving down a highway late at night and I see a car coming toward me with its headlights out, I'm not codependent. I don't leap out of my car, chase them down, or turn my car around and chase them down, run them off the road and tell them they got to get their lights on. But I usually don't just ignore what I'm seeing. Usually, I do the thing that I can do. I flash my lights at them. Maybe they see it, maybe they don't. That's not up to me. What's up to me is to do the right thing. What's up to me is to shine some light into their darkness. Kind of a Christian analogy there. Okay, now, I don't know how many people are here, but I'm going to bet that I am among the very least sophisticated theologically in the group. So this is going to be a real fly over simple way of looking at some very basic theology. And this is Christian theology. If you don't happen to be Christian, I apologize. You just bear with me. I think the general idea can work in any event. In Lutheran talk, we talk about law and gospel, or sin and grace, bondage and liberation. And the law, yeah, the law says what to do and what not to do. Don't kill, don't steal. But it really, at its basic level, the moral law is very much like the natural law. It just tells us how life works. Life works a lot better if you don't steal. That is, if you're not coveting and worrying about what other people have and envying them and going after all that stuff, your life goes better. Life works better if we treat it respectfully. Obviously, this is true. You can compare life in parts of Ukraine with life in the United States right now. And I guess that's really true. And if I do the moral equivalent of jumping off the roof, I suffer consequences. It's just the way it is. So you got that side, the law, the sin, bondage, whatever. And on the other side, we have grace, gospel, liberation, which tells us not about how life works, but about how God works. God is there. If I do the moral equivalent of stepping off the roof of the building, if I do break the law says, follow the law and God will love you. God's grace says, stop following the law and God will not stop loving you. God's love will become a love with you, even a suffering love with you. So when I do the moral equivalent of stepping off the roof of the building, God is there with me. Maybe that I've done the moral equivalent of breaking my knees, but God is there with me to help me back up again. That's how God works. Okay, like I said, not all that complicated in terms of the theology that goes into this process. What do you think of when you hear or see the word intervention? If what you see or hear is what was portrayed on an unethical television show by the same name, then I have really good news for you, because this is not the way we approach interventions. If what you hear is perhaps some troubled lady coming to see the Reverend and saying, Reverend, I don't know what to do. My spouse, my partner is on a bender again. And the Reverend tilts back her 10-gallon hat and says, don't you fret none, Nell. I'll round up the intervention posse and we'll grab that doggy and drag him into a treatment program. If that's the kind of thing you hear when you hear intervention, this is not what we're talking about. There are at least 5 terrible, horrible, no good, very bad intervention myths. One of them is, it's up to us to get this person to change. It's up to us to get him to counseling or to treatment or whatever. And to make matters worse, we only have one chance to make this happen. And that means when we're doing this intervention, it's going to be a super high stress experience. Because the only option we have to offer here is treatment. Or else, we can't do anything. That's 5 terrible, horrible, no good, really bad intervention myths. This is the way we look at it when we're flashing our brights. And I hope you have the handouts. But here's this is a quick overview of the concept. Notice you got that darker inner circle. That's the delusional system, or the fixed false beliefs, or the false mindsets that go on in a person who's a high-risk drinker or drug user. And then in the brighter outer circle, we have the tools for intervention. And you'll notice that if I say what I see, I'm being factual with somebody, that's law. Here's your behavior, that's law. If I say how I feel, especially if I'm talking about the care and concern that I have and the care and concern that God has, there we're talking about grace. Saying what we know, shining some light into misinformation. The illegal drug using community and the heavy drinking community are loaded with tons of misinformation. Saying what we know, giving some education is actually law. It's just talking about how life works. And then this delusion that I know what I'm doing, I got it under control, everything's fine, I've learned my lesson now, don't worry about me, blah, 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 all that. When we put down our boundaries, that's law, that's putting limits on them. And finally, when we say there is hope for change because the underlying subconscious delusion is, I can't change. The drug around me is too powerful. Everybody else around me is too powerful. I can't change. And we can say, with the grace of God, our God is bigger and better than any old phony false God that you ever got yourself hooked up with. I like using this set of tools because they're simple, and a lot of other people have told me that. It works for all kinds of issues. It even appeals to high-risk drinkers. I've worked in coaching people who were other high-risk drinkers doing an intervention with somebody who was even worse. And they were okay with it. And you don't have to be really smart or really shrewd or really knowledgeable to make use of these tools. Number one, say what you see. That's because the person doesn't remember a lot of stuff or doesn't remember it accurately. I don't remember. Now, that might be due to blackouts, but really much more commonly, I don't remember things the way they happened because I have something called euphoric recall. She remembers me being an ass. I remember being the life of the party. That's euphoric recall. So if I'm going to shine some light into that part of the delusional system I don't remember, I'm going to need to be factual. Now, this is the hardest thing. I work with a colleague who spends a good 45 minutes on helping people understand what being factual means. We don't have the opportunity to do that today. Being factual means we avoid diagnosing. Being factual means I'm talking about that person's behavior. What did I see them do? What did I hear them say? Or I'm talking about the results of their behavior. I didn't see them kick the door in, but I do see that the door has been kicked in. I wasn't with them when they got a drunk driving charge, but I can see that they have one. All right. So I'm seeing or hearing their behavior. This means I'm not diagnosing. If I'm saying to somebody, I think you got a drinking problem, that's a diagnosis. It's not clinical, it's okay, but that's a layperson's diagnosis, and it's highly arguable. There's lots of ways to argue against that diagnosis. All we're trying to do when we're being factual, and that's holding up a person's behavior to them. It is, if you will, showing them their sin. Now, it's not judgmental. It's not, you bad sinner, you've done these terrible things. It says, this is just what we saw you do. And what we're doing is shining some light into the darkness of that selective memory. All right. I served a small church out in Western Kansas. Lady came to see me one morning. She says, I don't know what to do. My husband's drinking again. I think he's an alcoholic. Well, I was pretty excited about helping her because I'd been in recovery for a couple of years, and there's a lot of stuff about running a church I never really did understand, but I really knew something about alcoholics. Well, fortunately, she and I went to see a counselor, and in his coaching, he took that whole word alcoholic out of our vocabulary and had us talking about facts. Now, I was a pastor. I didn't have any access to facts, but she did. Here was one she used. She said, you know, sometimes when you're drinking and you discipline our children, and the children were really little children, and you discipline the children, you use foul language. Well, he's all huffy. So I can't believe you're bringing up something like this. I love our children as much as you do. And she said, I know you do. That's why I know it's the alcohol that's the problem. You never talk that way to our kids when you're sober. Okay? It's the difference between being factual and diagnosing. A couple of folks came to see me when I was working in the treatment center, so we got to intervene with mom. She got admitted to the hospital with some heart problems the other night, and they got her upstairs, but she was so intoxicated, it was just awful. We've got to do something about that. I'm going to tell her, this is what the son says, I'm going to tell her she made a fool of herself when they brought her into the hospital. Well, I was able to give them some coaching. So when they intervened with her, among other things, they said instead, Mom, the night they got you into the hospital, got you up here to intensive care, you were so loud and so rambunctious that at least twice the nurses had to come in here to ask you to get settled down. And when that didn't work, they called your physician back and he ordered the drug Haldol. Haldol is a major tranquilizer. You get enough of it, you can drop an elephant. This is heavy duty stuff, okay? Notice the difference in impact when, Mom, you made a fool of yourself, and twice they asked you to settle down, then they had to get a major tranquilizer for you. You can still argue with the second one, but it's a lot harder to do. One of the better interventions that was done on me was done by a classmate in seminary. I'd gotten so loud and obnoxious during the party that he stopped playing the recording, or stopped playing the music, began recording me just for a few moments, and then played it back. Suddenly I was stuck listening to the same drunken fool that everybody else had been stuck listening to. Now, of course, I didn't jump up and say, oh, thanks, Dan, I'll change my whole life. But it made an impact on me. It said something to me. It made an impact, and I always remembered it. It always was there. Also, by the way, I shut up so they could go ahead and have a good party. Some parents were in with their daughter. She was in about her third week of intensive outpatient. And the counselor said, this was a kid who smoked a lot of pot. And the counselor said, you know, what I've noticed is that you stopped coughing a few days ago. And she says, what? I don't cough. And the parent said, are you kidding? You're hacking around the house all the time. But we'd also noticed that you have not coughed in the last few weeks. You would think she would have known that she coughed. Well, she didn't. And a lot of times people need reinforcement here. And this is something that pastoral care you can do. People need reinforcement to say they know exactly what they did. Maybe they do, and maybe they don't. But you need to describe it in a factual way. Okay? So I think that's law. That's the word sin has such a terrible reputation, but in a sense, that's what we're doing, showing them their wrongdoing. The second tool is to say how you feel. Now, families are going to have lots of feelings, okay? And that's understandable, certainly understandable. And if you're doing pastoral care with a family that's really upset, you want to hear that anger and that hurt and that rage. And it's okay for them to have that. But when we're talking to the individual, we want to come from the sense of caring and concern. Those are the feelings we want to be leveling at this point. The care about the person and the concern about the problem. We also may need to listen, and if you're talking to somebody with an alcohol problem or a drug problem, sometimes you need to listen with what the psychologists call accurate empathy, so they know they're being heard. There is a short YouTube video called "It's Not About the Nail." It's 3 minutes long, and it shows it, and it's you'll enjoy it. It's just 3 minutes, and it shows how it's important to listen to with accurate empathy, even if the problem is flippin' obvious. It's still a time when it's important to listen with accurate empathy. The name of the video is "It's Not About the Nail." If you put that in your YouTube search, it'll come up with that. Down underneath, what's going on emotionally very often is nobody cares. Now, this isn't self-pity, nobody cares. This is nobody really notices this. Nobody really notices that what I'm doing here. So, I think I'm okay. Working as a treatment chaplain, it happened fairly often that somebody would say, I think I'm really the only one that I hurt, when this is almost never true. There was a priest in our community, and he'd been in treatment a couple of times. People from the church and people from the hierarchy had intervened with him, gotten him into treatment. Here he was drinking again and in trouble again. And one of his lay friends said, "Max, you're one of the finest men I know. And it just kills me to see what your drinking is doing to you." Had not occurred to Max that he was worth sobering up for. Now, I know he heard it in treatment 100 times, but it just hadn't come into his head that way. That was an intervention. We had a guy, he was really upset with his son. His son was on the street drugging and dealing. His son was, 15, 16, 17, so he'd be gone from home. There's a single dad, and his son's gone from home a couple, 3 nights a week, and like that, and so on. And so the counselor, I wasn't working with him, but the counselor asked him, he said, "Well, do you care about your son?" And the man exploded. "Are you kidding? Of course I care about him. What do you think I'm doing here?" Okay. So let's let that care show through. After coaching, the man, who was pretty savvy, way more than I would ever be, knew how to find his son when he was out there on the street. He knew how to find him, knew who to ask, and so on. And this was his intervention. He said, "Son, I just want to talk to you. It's just going to take a minute. I'm going to tell you some things, and I'm going to leave you alone. I know what you're doing. I love you. And I will always be your dad." And then he walked away. No, the son didn't come running after him saying, "I want to change my life." That's not what happened. But that was a wonderful intervention in contrast to all the angry ones that had gone on before. Again, somebody who intervened with me, a college professor in whose home I'd been drunk a few evenings before, and had said a bunch of obtuse things. And he said, among other things, he called me into his office a few days later, and he said, among other things, "I'm concerned your drinking might be a problem for you." Now, he wasn't mad, and he certainly had a right to be, but he wasn't. He was just concerned about me, and that's really hard to reject. Okay. It's unusual for pastors, clergy, to have direct access to the facts about somebody's drinking or drugging. You can help support people who do have the facts. But when clergy tell somebody they care about them, people believe them. People believe us when we tell them we care. People believe us when we say, "God is just crazy about you the way you are." People believe that, and that's our sharing of grace and good news. Almost always, when there's an intervention of any kind, people are going to have the first two tools. You have to have some kind of facts, otherwise you have nothing to talk about, and you have to have some kind of care and concern, otherwise there's no motivation to say anything. The other three tools come into play from time to time. Sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not. There's a lot of mythology around drugs and heavy drinking. But it all boils down to, it can't hurt me. And this is where not only, education in a more formal sense, and in a more formal sense was important for me, but education in the informal sense, in that taking advantage of the teachable moment is where we shine some light. From time to time, some young person in our treatment program say, well, hey, Otto, marijuana is a natural product. So, well, if it's natural, it can't really hurt you any. Rattlesnake venom is a natural product. Of course it can hurt you. Hurricanes, tornadoes are natural products. Natural doesn't make it safe. Sometimes you just get a piece of really bad information right in front of you, and you can shine a little light into that darkness by giving them good information. Common belief, and if you've never heard this, I can't believe it because it's so common. If you're drunk when you're in a car crash, you're less likely to get hurt. Now, it's not true, and I understand why people believe it, but it's not true, partly because people think, well, if you're loose, you're not so likely to break bones. No, your muscles tense in order to protect your bones better and your internal organs. So if you're loose, they're more likely to break your bones and other things. Actually, the head nurse of our emergency department, which was a trauma center, she was the head nurse of trauma, who got the title Trauma Mama. Anyway, Carol gathered the data from 100 or more car crashes where alcohol was involved. People who were under the influence had about 2.5 times the cost associated with their injuries as people who were not. So obviously, being drunk does not protect somebody. And sometimes you can have to give them a little piece of information about that sort of mythology. I used to interview all our patients at the treatment program. I spent a year doing this, interviewed 250 adult patients. Who are all the people who've intervened with you before you got here? On the average, they could identify different, between 10 and 11 different people or agencies as having flashed their lights at them. Now, that's not 10 or 11 times. That's more times than that, way more. But 10 or 11 different people or agencies. I always ask them about their kids. Have your kids ever said anything to you? One guy said, well, actually, no, but every time there's a drunk driving commercial on television, my 6-year-old makes sure that I see it. Okay, so that is a 6-year-old who's offering education to his father about alcohol problems. Anybody can do it if you know what you know and you're willing to share it, and there's an opportunity to do so. Okay. This is one where clergy really need to reinforce good, kind people who are out there enabling usually their adult child, but often their teen child as well. And sometimes it's other people who are in other kinds of relationships. This is the false belief that I've got it under control. The more I run into painful problems, the more likely I am to decide I need to change. The more other people protect me from the painful results of my drug use or alcohol use or other issue, the less likely I am to change. There's an old saw. We're a lot more likely to change when we feel the heat than when we see the light. So one of the things that you can do as pastors, because pastors rarely have powerful consequences or any consequences to enforce on somebody, but you can support those family members in making difficult decisions by explaining they're acting out of love. They're acting in a way that is consistent with Christian love, if you will, or with the love of God, if you will. They're acting by doing these difficult things. Oh, but if I let my son out of the basement and force him out of the basement, he's just going to be on the street. Yeah, maybe, but more likely he'll be couch surfing with other drug-using friends. We got to help. We can help people see that there are ways out of this. This is important for maintaining our boundaries. What do I need to do to take care of myself? I cannot solve somebody else's problems with drinking or drugging, but I can take steps toward solving my problem with their drugging or drinking. That's really what that 6-year-old was doing when he offered education to his father, was taking a step to solve his problem with his dad's drinking. So give that family permission to enforce those consequences. One of the better interventions I was involved with included a pastor and the family. We were actually planning a more formal intervention on the dad. We had 2 teenage kids, a 7-year-old, mom, the pastor, and a neighbor. And we were getting ready to have this conversation with the dad, which we were planning for a later time. And then the dad walked in early from work. Oh, well, he knew he could look around the room and know what was happening. And so, we're off and running. And everybody's saying what they had to say in the best of their ability. And then, unrehearsed and unplanned, the 7-year-old says, "Daddy, when you come home at night, sometimes you make me so scared because you're so loud." Well, he'd pretty much been digging in his heels up to then, but he melted right there. And he knew, because the apple of his eye took steps to take care of what's on her side of the boundary, her fears of her daddy. He knew he had to take steps himself. Many years ago, we lived in a small house, and our neighbor's house, there was no sound buffer between our bedroom and the neighbor's living room, which was never a problem until we had a couple of stoners move in next door, and they'd come home late at night. And then on a summer's day, when we had the windows open, they'd play their music. And it was loud and it would wake us up. Well, twice I went over there to ask them to turn the music down. They were very nice about it. They just didn't realize it was a problem for us. And okay. The next morning after the second time, my wife, who was a probation officer, said, "I'm going to go talk to those guys." Now, she did not assume that they would remember that I had been over there to talk to them. So she reminded them of the facts. 2 times in the last 3 weeks, my husband has been over here to ask you to turn the music down. If we have to do that again, we'll just call the police. Now, we were pretty sure they didn't want the police nosing around in their house at that time. And we never had a problem with that again. Now, remember, it was none of our business whether they wanted to smoke weed or not. We might like it or dislike it, but it's not our business. Our business was getting a good night's sleep. So all Sandra was doing was taking steps so we could get a good night's sleep. Now, you look at that and you say, oh, she was making a threat. Oh, yeah. But she was making a really good threat. A really good threat is credible and enforceable. You knew she could do it. Calling the police is nothing. See, she didn't say, we'll have the police after you. We can't do that. That's up to the police. But we can call them. So it's enforceable and it's credible. If Sandra told you she was going to do something, yeah, you knew she was going to do it. Threats get a very bad name because people make threats that are not credible or not enforceable. You keep doing those drugs, you're going to die. I'm not going to kill you. It's not my threat to enforce. Well, if you keep doing that stuff, I'm not going to talk to you again. I know darn well I'm going to break down eventually and talk to him again. Not credible. If it's going to be a threat, it's actually a plan to take care of what's on my side of the boundaries. That's what it is. And if that has a negative impact on you, so be it. But all I'm saying is I'm taking care of my business on my side of the boundaries. This is why we encourage people family members to engage with Alanon and give Alanon a chance. You don't go to one meeting and say, I don't think this fits me. You go to 6 meetings and you talk to somebody and say you're new working with this and ask them if they could have coffee with you sometime. You start trying to integrate yourself with that group and you figure out and you start making connections and you start being a part of it, and then it'll make sense to you. Tool number 5, this is a strong suit for pastors and clergy. Say there's hope for change because this underlying problem is I can't change. The drug's too powerful. Or all the people around me are like this, which is often true. And so what we shine some light by offering them hope for change. From time to time, I would assign a client to read what I call the parable of the alcoholic and the codependent. Generally, that's called the parable of the prodigal son. But it's about 2 sons who commit the same sin, actually, one being codependent, the other being much like an alcoholic. And that is, they decline to be their father's child. That's their sin. The one does it when he says, give me my share of the inheritance, which means, Dad, I'd like you dead and out of my way. Which, by the way, in reality, no child would say that to their father in the Middle East. The old man would just have him beaten. But this old man, loves the son so much, said, okay, well, this is a fire sale. We have to sell everything fast in order to raise the 1/3 that goes to the younger son. The older brother, the codependent, Mr. Self-Righteous, I gave my whole life to you and you never even gave me a little goat to party with my friends. This older brother, his role at a banquet is to be the maitre d'. The father presides, looks over everybody, sees somebody without enough wine, says, son, the guest over there needs the right stuff. That's the role of the older brother. And he refuses to come into the banquet. He too refuses to be his father's son. Each one of these people is loved by the Father no matter what. And for that alcoholic brother, it's welcome back into the fold when he's ready to be done torturing himself. This is the grace, the good news, the liberation that we have to offer. If you've never been to some meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, look them up in your community, or if you know somebody in AA, wangle an invitation from them and sit in those meetings. You will often hear, sometimes you'll hear people go down the road of self-pity, but generally you will hear people who understand what it means to have a life redeemed. I understand it. I understand it because had my life not been redeemed, if I were still alive today and drinking, I would be living in bitterness and resentment. I would be living in physical pain because I would not have taken care of that pain. I would likely be addicted to narcotic drugs because I would not have taken care of that pain in the ways that I can take care of it now, which has to do with stretching and exercise. I would have been without friends. Perhaps one of my 3 lovely sisters would have made some kind of contact. That's what my life would have been. Like that. This is a life that has been redeemed, and I know it. And you'll see that same thing when you talk to people who are in stable recovery. Okay, we do refer people for help. If you don't know the agencies in your community, see if you can connect with a gatekeeper, somebody who knows the agencies in your community, and somebody who understands your faith and understands the agencies in your community, so that that's a person who can help guide you in making referrals. You don't need to try to keep up with all the agencies in your town because there's just too many of them and it's just too difficult. So this, for me, this has always been my mental toolkit. Ever since I learned it, this is my mental toolkit. I use it to plan when I've been working with families, and I use it informally. I hear somebody say something, I say, well, okay, what have I got? What are my facts? How do I express concern? Is there a piece of education I can offer this person? Is there a boundary issue involved here? And is there some kind of hope or help for change I can offer? I ran the family program at our treatment center for a few months. And here was it, and people are introducing themselves. And here's a guy who says, in front of all these family members, yeah, I drink a 6-pack every night, and it's never been a problem for me. Oh boy, what am I supposed to say in this context with all these other people? There's 8 other people in the room. What am I supposed to say to this guy? What are my facts? I don't know if alcohol is a problem for him, but I know that drinking a 6-pack a night is a long-term predictor for health issues. And I sure as a dickens feel concerned about it. So in that context, with the people around, because I can't let him walk out of that meeting and say, I told Schultz I drink a 6-pack a day and he doesn't think anything's wrong with it. Can't have that. So what I say is, I'm kind of concerned about your health when you talk about drinking a 6-pack every day. And it may be that there's a problem in there, or eventually there will be a problem in there. And if you'd like to chat about it after the meeting, then we can talk. And after the meeting, he did chat about it. And I said, you can get an eval here at the agency and they'll help it figure it out for you. Okay. But that's what I'm talking about, that mental toolkit. I got these 5 simple tools in my head. Okay, we're quickly running out of time, but here's the science, and that is stages of change. This is called the trans-theoretical model of change, which sounds way more impressive. But what it means is we have the change, in stages of change theory, people change in stages, and there are at least 6 of them. And I'm going to do this pretty fast. Prochaska and De Clementi are the authors of this concept, this way of looking at change. This goes back to either they're ready or they're not. Baloney. If they're in denial, if they're in pre-contemplation, which is the science word, then they believe there is no problem, and letting them meet painful consequences for their behavior, giving them education when the opportunity is there, expressing concern, those are tools that shine some light into pre-contemplation. Contemplation means, okay, I get it, there's something wrong, but it's probably the stupid town I live in, or this crummy person I'm married to, or whatever. But there's always something else. But yes, I am recognizing that there's some kind of problem involved here. Then we see people get into this preparation phase, which is very much on again, off again. Sometimes they're involved and they see it. They see, oh yeah, this is my problem. I got to deal with this. I got to get back to the meetings. I got to start calling my sponsor again. I got to do stuff. And then they hang out with an old drinking buddy and say, that's all garbage, man. You're okay. And you know what? Yeah, and they're off and running. You may have seen this if you've been around somebody who's had an intense sort of conversion experience and they're changing their life and everything's great. And then 3 weeks later, you learn, yeah, they're back down the tube again. They've been in that phase of change, preparation, what we usually call compliance defiance. You get into action, acceptance. Yep, it's my problem. I got to deal with it. Whatever else is wrong with everybody else in the world, this is my problem. It's up to me to take care of it. That's all I can take. And then you get to maintenance or surrender. It's really, do you still go to those meetings, Otto? Yes, I do. I love going to those meetings. I love sponsoring people. I love being a part of that community. It's not a problem. It's part of my life. Nobody remembers how they learned to brush their teeth, but I'll bet you went through the same phases of change before you reached the point that you are now, where brushing your teeth every morning is just a part of your day. No big deal, no nothing. You just do it. And in several of these phases of change, we can see people relapse and we start over again. But the point that I'm bringing to you, and when we have people come to treatment, they usually came to treatment in the second phase of change, contemplation, or the third phase where they're bouncing it back and forth once in a while in the action phase, but that meant they usually had been to treatment before. Nobody came to treatment because they were in denial, because they're in denial. And in treatment, we might be able to help somebody move through one or two stages of change. So if I think that me having a conversation with somebody is going to bounce them all the way from phase one, stage one to stage 5, I'm probably kidding myself. Okay, I ran over time. Oh, well, that's my life. I should leave this one up. The Google, if you want to help families with this stuff, the Flashing Your Brights talk, a secular version of that is on YouTube. There's another, you're going to meet my colleague Duke Engel next week. He has a video called Intervening to Help Yourself and Others, which is much more down to, planning out a specific intervention. And then last week's presentation on understanding substance abuse is also in these videos. And you Google Brian Independence Center videos. And that I found those videos to be really helpful to families. When I was coaching families, I'd say, watch these videos first. And they could come into a conversation then really prepared to talk about how they were going to approach somebody. Okay. Well, I ran a bit over time. I apologize for that, but we will take 5 minutes so people like me can stretch and take a break. And then we'll go into and we'll talk about case studies. So the time right now is 11:59. So we will come back to work at 12:04. So. Katie. Is there a Katie in the house?
There is. I was
Oh.
muted.
This is where we break up folks into 4 groups. It's
Very
not
good.
12:04 yet, so oh my goodness, look at what we have. Connie has a whole table of 5 people there. All right. Way cool. So we're gonna break into 4 groups. I'm hoping that you have the handout that has 4 different cases. Looks like a piece of paper, but print on it. All right, enough of that. Okay, welcome back. Those of you who come back, and we'll ask Katie to break the group up. And I think your instructions are at the top of the page. And looks like she's going great guns with it, so good enough. Mhm.
Instructions in the PowerPoint or a separate document?
I'm sorry, Melissa, say again.
Are the instructions in the PowerPoint or in a separate document? I only seem to have the PowerPoint.
You should have a document that says sample case studies.
Where would I have gotten that?
That's something that Ed would have sent out,
Oh, okay. I'll look for it.
and I think he sent it out just shortly before.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay. And then there's Dave. I guess that's a way of taking attendance, isn't it? Yes, I can send that to you. Do you get Ed's email? Katie?
I don't, alas, but I'll paste my address again here.
Okay.
Or I can email you.
Okay, Katie Wilbur at Gmail, all right. Oh, I do have your address. Oh, yeah. All right.
Bada bing.
Hmm. Okay. And you can unmute if you want to participate in the conversation. I know we only have a few minutes left, but we'll see if somebody can. See, the other groups are taking their full 60 seconds. So. Okay, group one. Group one said they had a rich conversation in spite of the snafu that we had with the cases, which I thought everybody had, and almost nobody had. So my apologies for that follow-up, and we'll see if we can get the cases out to you. But we're going to move on to some other stuff next week. How did I wind up in the middle of the whole screen? I don't want to be here. Let's go back to gallery. Group one, you had a rich conversation. Can you tell us about it in 1 minute? Somebody
Who
from
was,
group.
which was group one? I don't even know what group we were in.
All right, Jerry, go ahead and tell us about your group. I don't know which group was which then. Yeah.
Oh, the group I was in?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we made up our own case study.
Mm-hmm.
And based on a conversation I had with a friend of mine who is worried about her sister who's married to a hoarder. So we were completely off the alcohol addict thing, but figuring that hoarding is an addiction of some sort. And I had an interesting conversation about the feeling things, to talk about our feelings of caring, but also anger. But what got really interesting towards the end was that degree of separation. As clergy, we're often talking to people who are not the person with the problem.
Right.
We're talking to a friend or a family member, you know, and so then we were just starting to talk about, well, should we be teaching them this model? Or, you know, and what about the ethics if it's somebody from another church? So I think we just, you know, expanded our brains a little bit to try to incorporate some of this.
Yeah, and absolutely. You can help people see this model, and you can, you know, send them to the Bryan Independent Center website where they can look at that video if they want, and just take care of things just that way. But yeah, it is on us normally as clergy to do coaching. I'm in a faith partners team at our church, which we'll explain at another time, but 2 of the 6 members are related to hoarders. And that's what brought them onto the team, is their relationship with hoarders, both parents who are hoarders. Anybody apparently who had acquaintance with the Depression is more subject to hoarding than most of the rest of us. From another group. What? We got everybody. I'll ask Zach, were you in a different group?
Yes, I was in a group with Melinda, Stephanie, and Kenny. I think I got everyone right. I think, you know, I think you came in a little bit and we told you we had that rich discussion because we were able to share a little bit of where we were coming from, the work we do in this area, or the people whose lives come into contact with ours. And you know, a lot about what we do is relational to begin with, right? I think addiction, what I have noticed is it is a separation from community that really impacts the folks I work with. And so even with what we do to spend a little time building up our relations and knowledge of each other is helpful. You never know when you might need to reach out and find a colleague for support or help, or just share experiences so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I really appreciated that time, even without the case study. So thank you.
Good. Melinda has her hand up. And there she, and
There we go. Okay. Yeah, I was in that group. We had a good conversation. And I just, wanted to mention that just today, I have a ministry in my church. Sometimes people will come to me specifically for that problem, but I'm also finding that people that I'm working with in other ways that don't have anything to do with my ministry, all of a sudden are revealing that they've got this in their lives. And sometimes really confounding problems, really, like just one today. A woman that I'm working with in the confirmation preparation and talking to her. So it wasn't about her, but about her husband and the family. And there's hoarding in there too, alcoholism, drug addiction, but hoarding behind everything. And this, this toolkit really strikes me as very helpful. Like this is a way that I can suggest that, people begin to speak to their loved one. If that's the case. I mean, I don't know her husband, but she doesn't know how to approach this subject, and so I think this helps, to give her, let's say, a kind of structure, to think about how can I begin this discussion, this very difficult discussion, without letting it get, out of hands, like in the weeds, but keeping it to the facts. And I think that's so helpful. So I just wanted to offer that I just today, I'm finding that this is really very helpful, very pertinent. Thank you.
Great. I often would, in an initial conversation with family members, just had to let them vent. And we didn't do anything, I'm going to say constructive. Well, letting them vent is constructive, but we didn't, work on the plan or anything. We just had to let them go. And then the second session then could be much more focused that way. By the way, if you're Dave Sorensen, also has people just come up to him at his church and that he works with in other ways, but then they have the same kind of conversations you're talking about. All right, we're right up at 12:30. I know that people have commitments on their time. Let me offer brief prayer. And if anybody wants to stay for another 10, 15 minutes or however long you'd like to stay after this, that would be fine. I will make it a point to hang around. And we got something from Dean, so if Dean can hang around, we might be able to talk about that today. Gracious God, we give you humble and hearty thanks for bringing us together and for filling our hearts with your love, and help us to carry that love to other people who are often not easily lovable. And we know that we may not be so easily lovable ourselves, and you just go to bat for us like man. Praise be your name. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Otto.
Everybody. Anybody can stay who wants to. I'll hang out for a while here and we can talk. And if nobody stays, I'll go to lunch early.
Well, I will stick around for a couple minutes, Otto.
Okay. You got the question about the ethics?
Yeah. I'm a pastor. I'm in recovery. I'm also a seminary professor, and my students know I'm in recovery. I don't teach in the area, which is one of the reasons I took this class, to incorporate it in some of the work that I do. But it's not. I'm not a clinician. I'm a sociologist. So, but the ethics, when they know that you're in recovery and in leadership, and I kind of joke with some of my AA buddies, about anonymity. I never mention AA. That's how I do anonymity, but I didn't drink anonymously, so I can't recover anonymously. You talked about missing church. I actually missed a speaking engagement at a national conference where they carried me out on a stretcher
Yep.
And somebody called home and told my family I was dead. So yeah, it was.
It wasn't exactly wrong, was it? Spiritually
No,
speaking, yes.
spiritually
Right.
speaking, they weren't
Yeah.
wrong. So yeah, so people know I'm in recovery, and what happens sometimes is, and I'm sure you can relate to this. People from other congregations will come,
Mhm.
or seminary students will come. Their churches are not addiction savvy. They're
Mhm.
using the traditional sin, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm Pentecostal, so deliverance, right? You know, dump a bunch of progresso on their head and say rabba dabba do, and it'll be gone, right?
Yep.
And I do recognize that there are spirits.
Mhm.
My wife and I, our church is very holistic. If there's deliverance, and then there's healing and treatment. We're not anti-treatment or anything like that.
Mhm.
But when you've got people coming from other congregations, there's an ethical issue with regards to how much you can do.
Mhm.
Especially if it's a pastor you don't know. Do you make a cold call? Well, we're coming to you because we don't want the pastor to know, right? So I'm just wondering if you have any wisdom on that.
Oh, this is not, yeah, ethics. I do have some ethics, but this is this is not an area of my expertise. So yeah, they're coming to you with a problem that they know you can be of service to them with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing, it's certainly easier if it's okay for you to tell their pastor that, all right, you're working with them just on this specific issue, but and I think that would be fairly simple. But well, they come to you confidentially, and Dave, you may have some Dave and I are old friends. You may have some thoughts on this as well. But they come to you confidentially. Well, you've got to respect the confidence. It seems to me that's the higher value, is the respecting of the confidence. And then to maybe, I would be inclined after that initial session where we talk about, let them go ahead and talk about everything they need to talk about. And then maybe in the second session, talk about, now what's your reservation about talking to your pastor? And maybe the reservation is, well, whatever, he's going to be upset, or he's going to be angry and judgmental at the person that we're talking about. I don't know. And Dave, and I see that Stephanie is here. Do you have any thoughts on this, Dave? Because I'm afraid I'm not being very helpful. You're muted. You're still muted. There you go.
All right, thanks for pointing that out. I come from a non-denominational background, and so that may be a little bit different, but in my case, if someone comes from another church, I assume they're seeking me out for some reason, either despite my church affiliation or because of my church affiliation, or maybe it has no relevance whatsoever. But I kind of feel it's my duty to help them out. If they don't want their pastor to know, then I think that I might suggest that's not really in the best interest of your recovery, but I'll honor that if that's what you want. And I would hope that a pastor from another church would be acceptable to the fact that this person came to me because they wanted my help, and you know, I mean, I have some experience in addiction recovery, and so maybe they came to me because they knew that I had helped someone they knew or something like that. Yeah. You know, I think if I were the pastor of a church, and I'm not, I'm actually a lay pastor, I think I would be fine if someone went to another pastor and said, you know, I'd really like your input on this particular issue. You know, my pastor's not an expert in this. I'd be like, well, that's fine, you know, go ahead. I'm not going to be so possessive of my theology and my doctrine that I'm going to try to keep that person captive and prevent them from receiving the help that they need, I guess. I don't know if I'm being much help either, but I guess that's my
No.
worth.
Here's the line that really stuck out. What's in the best interest of their recovery? Right? That can be a guideline, right? It may not be in the best interest of their recovery for their pastor to know, because she or he may be very judgmental. It may be in the best interest of their recovery if, you know, I ask, do you mind if your pastor and I have a conversation? Still giving the, you know, keeping the confidentiality. You know, I'm obviously not bound by all of the legal confidentiality things that you are as a pastor, and you all as therapists, clinicians. But yeah, what's in the best interest of the person's recovery makes a lot of sense to me. That's very helpful.
That's very good. That's the top value here. And then if whatever, the other pastor gets wind of it and is upset and said, well, this is what I saw as the top value. And I'm sorry you disagree with that, but maybe we can have a greater conversation about it.
Yep. That's a good, safe, not unassailable, but it's a safe space to stand in. I appreciate that.
Well, I am working with a gentleman who is a pastor, and he does not want his congregation to know that he is dealing with an issue, and you know, I can understand that, and that, you know, that could be a big deal. But, you know, that's really not my ethical issue to determine. You know, I'm really more interested in the individual who needs recovery. You know, his ministry context to me is really his problem. You know, if it were me, you know, I think it would be very important to me to have some transparency with my congregation and the other staff in the church regarding the issues that I was struggling with, even if it meant that, you know, I probably wouldn't be doing ministry anymore in my case. But that's not the way he sees it. And so, you know, I'll honor that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I after I'd been in recovery a couple of years, I served a small church. I also was a chaplain, part-time chaplain at the neighboring drug treatment program. Well, I never made a public announcement, you know, that I'm a man in recovery. I'm engaged with AA. Well, I'm in a town of 3,500, for crying out loud. You go to the AA meeting, you know, it's you know, there's not a lot of secrets in a town that size, but it was also not something I kept secret. That is, when it was appropriate in pastoral care conversations, I gladly talked about my 12-step recovery and so on. And Ed Treat, when he took his first call, he'd been in recovery for a while. When he took his first call, and he had conversations with the initial committee, and whether he should talk about his recovery in the interview process. And he says, there's no way we can talk about my spiritual journey otherwise.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't go there. there was an interesting upshot, and I got this from our bishop, which was, so when they were in a bigger meeting with, many members of the congregation, and Ed shared some things about his personal journey, his recovery, and invited other people around the circle to share about their journeys. And then you had people who've known each other all their life saying, gee, Terry, I didn't know that about you. So it was important for the community that he really be open about it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm involved in a whole nother project, and I would be delighted to visit with you about that project, and your input and maybe your association with it in another time. And that's the Center for the Restoration of Impaired Clergy.
I'm very.
And Otto knows this, that I am also in recovery, and I don't make any secret of the fact that I'm in recovery at all. And it sounds like you guys don't either, but certainly the staff of my church, as well as the congregation of my church, knows this. But I think that's an integral part of the ministry that I'm participating in, because if people don't know that I'm in recovery, how are they going to know to come ask me to help them with their recovery?
Yeah. I've been very clear on the church side and the recovery side. I learned good theology in the church. I learned how to live it in AA. Those are my two rails. And so I'm very interested, Otto, in the center. I wrote that down because one of the things that I'm discovering as I move around the faith and recovery movement is that African-American clergy are not aware of these resources. Yeah. There's a disconnect, right? And so I teach at Howard University School of Divinity, historically black seminary. And so one of my dreams is to connect African-American churches and denominations with resources like yours, with like the center, do some things that would be, I'm hoping to get some grant money to do some stuff around the Black church and recovery. We have a resource center at Howard that I direct. I just feel as though one of the ways that I can do 12th step is to use the platform that I have. So there's just I've been treatment 4 times, detox, been institutionalized 32 times, right? That's not unusual, right? It took me a while to get this thing. But the short version is, the first time I went to a treatment center was the Karen Foundation in Pennsylvania, where I was living at the time. Yeah. 180 clients, 2 were African American, and I'm sitting there, I'm looking around and saying, wait a minute, I know that, the shame barriers, the cultural barriers, the economic barriers, if you're dealing with disproportionately poor people, because even if your insurance covers it, the copay is a monster, right? Yep. So, and insurance companies don't want to pay, all that stuff that you guys know. So sort of my subtext in this is at some point, how do we make these resources available to the African-American church? So I'm very interested in what you're doing with the center.
This is probably premature for me to talk this way, but if you could handle another 1-hour monthly board meeting, I would love to recommend to our board that we meet with you at least once. And because we don't have, and we're a really new outfit. We started getting together a year and a half ago just by accretion. I just thought, because I'm president of the board of the Fellowship of Recovering Lutheran Clergy, I thought, well, you know what? We need to get policy with our synod, with our church. And then it turns out if you have policy, you got nothing. Because you have to have program to enact policy. And so then we call around to other church bodies and say, what have you got? You know, and I mean, guys in recovery, women in recovery in those church bodies. No, pretty much nothing. So we just gathered as volunteers. It's just been like 2 months ago that we began to get some funding. So we can really start putting things together, and we became a nonprofit, and we now have a board. But we have no representation from the African American community, and we know that's a huge lack. So
you said an hour a month?
Yep.
I'm very interested.
Okay. Give me your email, would you?
Sure. It's HTRULEAR Harold Trulear, H Trulear
Okay.
at howard.edu.
Well, that's easy.
Yep.
Okay. I thought mine was pretty easy because it's my name, Otto B. Schultz, at outlook.com. So, and people still screw it up. So I don't know.
Well, people mess my last name up. So
I
it's
can see it.
TRULEAR. I don't know if it's on the screen or not. I can't see it
It
on
is.
mine.
Yep, it is
Okay.
it is on the screen.
Okay. Okay.
Because we have a board meeting coming up. Probably, I think it's usually the third Thursday at 2:00 Central Time, so 3:00, I think, your time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's good. That works. Even I don't teach Thursdays in the fall, and my spring class is a Thursday. I have a spring Thursday class at 4:10, so I could give you at least an hour a month. And you said it was an hour meeting.
the meeting's an hour. If you can come to that and just give us maybe 10 or 15 minutes of who you are, what you do, how you relate to recovery, and like that. I mean, basically some of the stuff you've been talking about. And then first we'll have their current board members introduce themselves and say a little bit about who they are, so you get a sense of whether you feel a connection for that.
Sure.
And then we'll talk.
Okay. I'm
okay.
very interested.
All right. So am I. All right.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, gentle people.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I think I'm supposed to end the meeting. Is that right? Yeah.